Holy cow, man, what a regular season. It was amazing. And we're going to talk all about the last week. I'm sure, obviously, we're going to talk about regular season stuff. Let me tell you something we're going to do today. We are going to change the way that you play fantasy football. We're going to be doing it all season long or all off season long, but it gets started today. We got the NFL season to wrap up. We got some awards to give out. Uh, we got stats and more stats and more stats. And most importantly, we got NFL writer Adam Hulse. Let's get things started. It's that F and Morning After Show. All right. Welcome to the end of the regular season and the beginning of it all. It is time to start the NFL playoffs. First of all, congratulations to that team up north. They dominated last night. Just got to bring that up. It is football. I hate that team with every ounce of my being. But they dominated. They dominated parts of it. They dominated what they needed to dominate. They held on. And anyway, congratulations to them. And that's all I'm going to say about that, Adam. I'll give you a chance to say
Well,
something.
they dominated more so than the scoreboard said for most of the game. Like
Yes.
Washington was trailing by a touchdown for like a lot of that game, but it never really felt like, to me at least, that Washington was ever really in it. Like
No.
Michigan jumped out 14. They scored those two quick touchdowns in the first quarter. Washington was trailing the rest of the game. And again, though the scoreboard looked close until the end when Michigan ran away, a one touchdown lead almost felt insurmountable for most of that game, with just the way that it went and the way Michigan completely shut down everything Washington was trying to do.
They just couldn't seem to generate any offense, Washington. Um, we've talked before about how I've watched Penix Jr. play for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
um, because of when he used to play in Indiana. Uh, I don't know. We'll see. And everything changes in college. And look, you got the Brady's and the Purdy's, and even the Russell Wilsons, and the list goes on and on of guys that were okay to even below average in college, and then they perform at the NFL level. I am not a believer in Penix Jr. I believe he's a system quarterback. I believe he's absolutely phenomenal this year. I believe in his numbers. I believe he's one of the best quarterbacks in college this year. And I think that's about where his story is going to end. We'll find out.
Well,
Maybe I'm wrong.
well,
That's just how
like
I
what
feel.
I'll have to say about Penix is that his biggest strength has always been his accuracy. He is pinpoint accurate with where he puts the football. Last night in that game against Michigan, he was off the mark. He
Yeah,
missed a couple of big throws, a couple of his deep shots were off. And even the receivers he was hitting, usually he perfectly leads them, you know what I mean? Like places the ball where it needs
he's
to
usually
be
great.
for the most yards after the catch. He was not on point last night. I know he was hurt for some of the game. Maybe he was hurt before the game and had something going on that we didn't know about, but he did not look like himself. Maybe it was just the pressure that got to him, and he finally crumbled under it. And when it comes to Michael Penix as an NFL prospect, the big thing that's going to continually be talked about as the draft gets closer: multiple shoulder surgeries, multiple knee surgeries, and he's 24 years old. So the age and the injuries already are going to be major red flags when it comes to his draft profile.
It will. All right, that's it. Enough on college football. He is officially, I guess officially on his way to the NFL, so it still counts. This week we got a lot to cover. And so you guys know we always talk about the predictions that we did in the offseason, now that played out, and we always kind of recap week 18. The biggest thing we're going to do this week is change the way that you play fantasy football. We're going to get that process started. And believe me when I tell you it's a process, but we're going to get you on that track as well. To do that, we can't be here until 8 o'clock tonight. So what we're gonna
Hmm.
do is we are gonna combine the predictions and the week recap because they go hand in hand, and that way we kind of get to see it all, how it all laid out. It's all gonna make sense. It's all gonna make sense. Let's get into the predictions, but the Week 18 rewind. Okay, enough of that. Let's get back on track. Week 18. This is how it played out. I went 10-6. Adam went 8-8. Was it enough? Who wins at the end? Who had the best prediction show? Again, we went by team, game by game. We predicted every game, how it was all going to turn out. We already knew who was going to make the playoffs. And you'll see that at the end. And we did it all before the season ever started. Home team this week went 8-8 with the visitors. And you see there, it's also up in the corner, 44 passing touchdowns, 21 rushing, 2 defenses. And that's like 60-something, 67, which is short of last week's 73, but still pretty phenomenal. And so as we go through these, we're going to go by the division, and we're going to talk about this week's games while we talk about how well we did. And all makes sense right here. So we thought that the Saints were going to have the South all wrapped up. We were wrong. The records in the middle are their actual records. We put the division winner at the top. These are the records as we predicted them. Not so great in this division, but to be fair, this was the very first division we did. We did okay with Atlanta. You did great with Tampa. And, we were there with the Saints, but of course Tampa comes out on top.
No, I mean, it looks pretty good. I mean, 3 out of the 4 for me, I'm only 1 game off, on the Bucks, the Saints, and the Falcons. And then, the elephant in the room, right? That bold Panthers prediction that was episode number 1 of our team-by-team predictions. That was the first team we did, was the Carolina Panthers. And apparently I overestimated them too. I was 3 games over on their totals, so we both overestimated them, maybe you a little bit more than me.
But we're going to see we learned something along the way as well, and you'll see these results get a bit better as we go. So in this division, of course, the playoffs were on the line pretty much for all these guys, although some have better chance than others. Tampa did not look great as we roll into the playoffs. They did come out with the win. Carolina gets their coach fired. More on that in a little bit. Or not Carolina. Carolina's coach was already gone. Carolina has a coach to find. More on that in a little bit. And New Orleans, Derek Carr, show him why they brought him in. Drops 4 touchdowns. We'll see where he ranked this week. New Orleans knew they needed to win, but it was all for naught, and Tampa comes out on top. Any notes from those games?
That's who Derek Carr is, right? It's who he was with the Raiders also. You never know what Carr you're going to get week to week, and he has flashes of, like he did in week 18. He had a great game in week 18. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. It didn't matter at that point, they no longer controlled their own destiny. And as for the Bucks, they're kind of stumbling into the playoffs too. They lost in week 17 to the Saints, got destroyed. And then, they beat the Panthers to clinch the division in week 18. But let's be honest, they looked awful in that game. If they were basically playing any other team in the NFL, they would have lost that game.
And look, chime in with your comments all the way through the show. Anything you got to say, throw it in there. We're going to talk about, obviously, all these playoff matchups as well. Tampa looked horrible. They played very well the previous few games, and they draw Philly, who is on a horrible, horrible skid with a horrible, horrible pass defense. All that coming up as the show progresses. Let's get into the next one, and that is the AFC South. AFC South, wow. All of them were kind of in contention there going towards the end. Houston ended up being the only team that gets in. We had a great game earlier in the week with the Houston-Indianapolis game. C.J. Stroud comes through. Thank you, Ohio State quarterback, for finally showing up and making a name for yourself. We'll see how it happens after this. Obviously, we were way off on that one. I would challenge to find anybody that realistically, other than a diehard Houston fan, that really predicted them to win this division. But golly, talk about coaches, DeMarco Ryans. We thought, like most people, the Jags were going to run away with this one, and it just didn't happen. We got we got regression, which we expected. Maybe it doesn't reflect in the record. We thought the matchups would be well, but wow. And the Colts played better. I wonder what this season would have looked like if Anthony Richardson had been there. And Tennessee, they do even worse than we thought, and we thought they were going to be pretty bad anyway. Thank you for everything, King Henry and Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the top half of this listing, I was way off, obviously, with the Texans and with the Jaguars. You know as well as anyone how high I was on the Jaguars coming into this season. I considered them legitimate Super Bowl contenders. I considered Trevor Lawrence a legitimate MVP contender. Things didn't play out that way for the Jags, and then they collapsed at the end of the season. They still controlled their own destiny to the very end, to the very last game. They were in control of everything. They still couldn't get it done. A really disappointing season for a Jags team that I was very high on.
But that game, that Houston-Indianapolis game, Jonathan Taylor goes for 188. Nico Collins goes for 195. I mean, it was a fun game to watch. I didn't know who was going to win it. I thought Houston was in control, and then momentum shift, Indy was in control, and it came down to the end, and I really enjoyed that game.
Great game. Yeah, very exciting game. Definitely had a playoff feel to it. And I'm really excited to see what CJ Stroud can do in a postseason game. If that game against the Colts was any indication, he's going to be just fine.
Draws a tough matchup, and we'll talk about that in just a bit later on in the show. Jags, Tennessee, obviously I was hoping for Tennessee to come through. They did. Hopkins had some money to play for, and he showed up. And the Jags, they've been on that skid, and they looked how they have the last few games. So thankfully they lost. Pittsburgh gets in. We'll see what they can do with it. They lose Watt in the process, so that sucked. The AFC North. I told you this one I don't really count this one against us. We didn't know Burrow was going to go down. If we had known Burrow wasn't going to be there, I probably would have had Pittsburgh at number one by myself. But look, nobody said Pittsburgh would get the double-digit wins. They got the double-digit wins, baby. Barely, but they got them, and they definitely lost a couple that they could have. So that 13-4 record turned out to not be too far off the mark. They dropped a couple games they shouldn't have. But I mean, they definitely could have got there. Obviously, the story is Baltimore. We're obviously going to be talking a lot more about Lamar throughout the show as we talk about fantasy playoffs, as we talk about season-ending stats, and of course the Cleveland Browns. Big surprise. I got some great stats about the Browns as well, so stick around as we change the way you play. But AFC North, what do you got, Adam?
Well, I mean, for me, I guess I underrated a lot of this division. I knew it was a division that would kind of be competitive with each other and beat up on each other. I had three teams with almost identical records. You hit it with the Bengals. It's hard to accurately judge the Bengals with Burrow missing so much time. Chase missed time. Higgins missed time. They caught the injury bug with their key players of why they've been so good for the past few years. So let's just see what they do next year. You can kind of just throw this one in the trash for the Bengals and not overthink it or overanalyze it. The story now becomes, do they keep T. Higgins or does he walk? You know what I mean? That's more the thing with the Bengals. And I mean, man, the Ravens, we both gave them a winning record, but they were definitely better than either one of us expected. And they are the clear-cut, undoubted, no question, best team in the NFL this season.
And Cleveland, Joe Flacco getting it done. He's on a tear. Coming in the
That's
playoffs.
Their fourth quarterback, and they've won games with all four of them. Unbelievable.
I'm going to ruin a stat for one of the big stats. Only half the league went 17 games this year. Went 16 games this year. Not even half. Not even 10 quarterbacks went 17 games this year, but only half. It was actually less. It's only 15. 15 quarterbacks went 16 or more games. All the rest of them didn't make it the whole way. That's how it looked this year. We'll talk more about that later as well. The games, I mean, Cincinnati tried. Browning was a nice fill-in. Driscoll ends up coming in. Cleveland drops it. Cincinnati finishes the season on a win. Cleveland didn't really matter because they already went in. And I don't know. I still think Cleveland's going to be a tough.
Look, I mean, Cleveland is a great example of how crazy the NFL is. I mean, who would have thought in a million years they'd be benching Joe Flacco, not for performance, but to rest him to keep
Right.
him safe for the playoffs. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. We got some great Flacco stats coming up. You're not going to want to miss those. NFC West. NFC West finished up. See, I told you it gets a little better. Finishes up kind of exactly how everybody thought it would. Even you had, San Francisco up there in contention. We thought Seattle was going to be better. That's the story here, is how Seattle just blew it. They had the team, they had the talent, they were doing fine. Beginning mid-season, and then they just dropped everything, let it all go. Had a chance to get in. It was an outside chance, and they blew that too. Rams are the opposite end of that. The Rams, nobody gave them a chance. Nobody thought that they would be here, and here they are. And honestly, the Rams are definitely one of the teams I want no piece of in the playoffs right now.
Absolutely. And I've been saying that about the Rams for a few weeks now, that if they can, punch that ticket to the playoffs, depending on their first round matchup, I mean, I think we're going to probably talk about that matchup a little bit more later, but that's a matchup they can win against the Lions, like let alone the whole, Stafford situation. That is a matchup on paper that favors them in a lot of areas. Again, we'll get into that more. But when it comes to the Seahawks, which you hit on, I feel like I hit them on the head halfway, and that Geno Smith is going to have serious regression this year. Where I missed was that I didn't think it would matter too much, that they'd be able to overcome it because of how good they were everywhere else. I guess I was wrong about that. Quarterbacks still matter, I guess, right?
Quarterbacks, for some reason, I don't know why, but yeah, they still matter in today's NFL. And let's give a little bit to the Arizona Cardinals too. Let's give them a couple
Feisty
seconds.
team.
Whoa.
Feisty team.
We were down on Kyler Murray. We did not think Kyler was worth it, and I would say in these last couple games he earned his paycheck, and he leaves you with the necessity to say, I wonder what would have happened with the Arizona Cardinals had he been there the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, they could have been a more competitive team. They were pretty much feisty all year. They were competitive. We talked about the Cardinals a lot, that they were in a lot of games. They competed a lot. And the guy who's not getting enough credit this season is Jonathan Gannon. Excellent job in his first year as a head coach with backup quarterbacks. He has Clayton Tune starting games. There was a lot of messes going on in Arizona, and sure, 4-13 isn't the best record. That's still better than a lot of people thought they would be. Much better than both of us had them being this year. And then, Kyler comes back, and they look like a competent, competitive team.
Seattle still too little, too late. Arizona ends up dropping that one at the end by 1 point, but Seattle out. San Francisco, maybe the strongest team in the playoffs right now. We'll talk about that. And the Rams versus Detroit. You can't. Thank you, script writers, because bam, there it is.
Well, the script writers won on a few of these matchups. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
They really won like across the board. Like, there's been a couple points this season where we pointed out the scriptwriter thing. If they were trying to prove that it's not scripted, they did an awful job by making these playoff matches trying to pretend that it's not.
Absolutely. 100%. The Cowboys, look, we said at the beginning of the season, we've been saying all season long, the NFC East has not had a repeat champion in almost 20 years. Thank you again, script writers, for making sure that didn't happen. Again, Philly, they're horrible right now. Philly is absolutely horrible. They are not where they want to be going into the playoffs. I don't mind playing Philly in the playoffs right now. We'll talk about that. The Giants try to salvage a little bit of a season. They've got a lot of housekeeping to do. The Commanders did some housekeeping. Ron Rivera, of course, gone. Now we'll talk about that situation. But let's give the props to your Cowboys. They come out. They do work. They do it on the road in a fantastic game. That game was absolutely great. And, they got it done. They got a nice matchup for the end of the season, but they didn't blow it, and I think that's what matters. We've said that a lot about them this year, that they come through when they were supposed to. But congratulations to your Cowboys, who finish at the top and end up taking it. But we did call it our first double win division here in the NFC East. You got to be feeling good.
I mean, I feel great about it. The Cowboys, they took care of their business in Week 18. Look, the skid when they lost to Buffalo and lost to Miami, and there's still that narrative out there that the Cowboys can't win on the road and can't beat the best of the best teams. Well, we're gonna find out in the playoffs, and they did enough this year to earn themselves those home games in the first round, and if they win in the second round, and then who knows, the NFC Championship, if the Niners are there, that game's going to be in San Francisco. If they get to that point, if the Niners stumble against a team maybe like the Rams or a team like that, then if Dallas can get there, they host it. We'll see how that goes. They're obviously going to have to play good teams now that it's the playoffs. At least two of them are going to be at home if they get to that point. So let's see if Dak can flip that narrative. I got to say, I love that after the game, Dak wouldn't wear the NFC East division champion hat.
It's not enough.
He said, I don't want to wear that hat. That's not my goal this year. I'll wear a hat later.
Yeah, I got that one already. No, if you're wondering what we're doing, recapping, we went through every game. We went through team by team, game by game, predicted how the season was going to come out. That's what you're seeing on the screen right now. Obviously, you see our records, the real record in the middle. We called this one right. This is before the season ever started. We did all this. And we're also recapping last week's games because we got to get to this playoff stuff. And most importantly, we got to get to the stats and the numbers that you care about to change the way that you play fantasy football, because that's what we're doing. That's the mission this year, is to change the way you play, get you more wins. You're going to see just how we're going to do that as the show goes on. So let's keep moving. AFC East. This was the division between the AFC East and the NFC East that we thought could get three teams in. It ended up being the AFC North. But again, this one I don't think was, but no, this one was hard to call, and we nailed it. I'm not going to take away our credit. We nailed this one. It could have been either or, and it came down to the very last game, which was absolutely fire. That game was fantastic as well. But Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills are an absolute heater. They are like, 5 of the last 6, something like it's ridiculous. Again, the Bills, like the Rams, are a team I want no part of in the playoffs. They finish it off. The Jets, of course, those records reflect preseason before Aaron Rodgers went down. They did okay. I mean, they almost lived up to Adam's expectations, and we expected the Patriots to be the worst. They were. We didn't expect them to be that bad. We'll talk about this more later. Bill Belichick, his last game, I don't know. We'll find out. But great games this weekend in this division. Obviously, the forefront is that Bills-Miami game, and we might see it again.
I mean, we could see it again. That's definitely possible that it happens again. Another game that truly had, like you said about Texans Colts, this had a very playoff postseason feel to the game from start to finish. And look, when it comes to the Bills, yes, they keep winning, and they went on this great hot streak at the end of the year, which is what they needed, because a few weeks ago, remember, they were underdogs to even make it into the playoffs. They needed a big streak just to get there. So props to Josh Allen and the Bills on getting it done. But the one thing I'll say about them, though, is it hasn't been pretty. It has not looked good along the way. They're finding ways to win these games, but most of them have been ugly. There's been turnovers. There's been missed opportunities, but then Josh Allen's getting it done in the end. So, they did what they had to do.
Well, and you say it is a negative, and folks at home, let us know how you feel about it. Let us know about how you feel about anything that happened this week or with the playoffs, anything you want to put in there. We love to see. But you use that as kind of a negative. I use it as positive because I think playoffs are ugly football. Offense wins games, defense wins championships, and I think if you can get the ugly wins, I think that's what's important. I mean, even the Super Bowl, when Kansas City was down, Philly had absolutely dominated. They had to dig in. They had to get it done. Mahomes put that team on his back and his one good leg, and it was dirty. And those are the ones I like to see. And I think the Bills are best equipped for that, for those dirty wins right now. Maybe better.
Well, they've proven they can win them, right? And they're now a battle-tested team, and they've had to, pull a few of them out late and find ways to win even when they're not playing their best football. And to me, that's a key to a team that can make a deep postseason run. Can you find a way to win a game when you're not playing your absolute best football? And the Bills have done that over the last month or two now that it's been So, watch out for them in the playoffs. That's not a team people want to play, especially with just like the Cowboys. They earned their way all the way into that 2 seed when that almost looked impossible a month or
Yep,
two ago. So now these
they're
teams got
feeling
to
good.
go through Buffalo with that wild crowd up there and everything like that. They're
And that
hosting
weather.
games. And if the Bills and Chiefs both win this week, finally the Bills get to host the Chiefs in a playoff game instead of having to go to Arrowhead again.
I got some great stats about that game as well. Look, I'm telling you, we're going to change the way you play. I promise you this. I promise you, we're going to change the way you play. You guys, stick around, pay attention. NFC North, I nailed that one too. You were down on them, but Detroit, again, one of those teams you don't want any part of. I think the Rams are probably on the better heater right now. I think Detroit has enjoyed a little more success and was expected to enjoy success. I think Detroit is more where people expected them, whereas the Rams are really, listening to their own story and believing in themselves right now. But I don't blame you for picking Chicago here. Like, I don't think you should feel bad about that because this division was really wide open. The defenses were not great going into the beginning of the season. We didn't know what we were going to get out of Love. Turns out we got something pretty good, and we got some stats for that as well. Minnesota, obviously, I didn't know Kirk was going to go down. I think Minnesota may have won this division if Cousins doesn't go down. They at least would have been there in the end and probably in the playoffs because they darn sure almost made it anyway. And Chicago, I think Chicago ended up playing exactly the way they were supposed to. It's just people wanted to see them play a little better. I don't know. Good games out of these guys this weekend, though, too.
Look, I mean, with the whole Cousins thing and the Vikings thing, what I learned the most about the Vikings this season is Kevin O'Connell is a damn good coach, man.
Damn
He
good.
is a damn good coach. He knows how to coach football games. He knows how to manage relationships. His quarterback situation, obviously a mess after Kirk Cousins, but the team didn't tank. The team didn't go down the gutter. They still competed in all of those games despite just missing out on the playoffs. And then look, when it comes to the Bears, that was a team I took a little bit of a shot on this year. More
You're
so
only
the
2 games
script
up.
of things never go the way everybody thinks that they're going to go. And this year's a great example. The Houston Texans were the team that won their division. There's always
Yeah.
at least one of those teams that nobody sees coming that grabs their division title and makes it into the playoffs. The Bears were my pick for that team this year. They didn't look like that team for most of the year, especially when Fields was out. But look, make no mistake about it, over the last few weeks of the season, the Bears played great. Their defense played as one of the best defenses in the NFL over the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season. And Justin Fields made a legitimate case for himself for the Bears not to take a quarterback at the top of the draft. We'll see what they decide to do, but at
Mm-hmm.
least he showed them and kept himself in the mix. If he had a bad ending to this season, he would have made their decision easy.
And they got the first round draft pick. Quick note, we didn't believe in Love. Love showed up. Well, I got some stats on him to go over in just a little bit. I don't know about, you talked about can Green Bay, can Lightning strike in Green Bay 3 times and they're a Hall of Fame quarterback. Neither of us going that far yet. It's one season. They didn't even win the division. But he played well. He showed flashes. And so Green Bay, they make the playoffs. We'll see what they do with it.
All script writers won on that one too, right? We
Yeah,
get
I guess
McCarthy
so.
against the Packers, so props to the script writers again.
I don't know how this happened, but somehow Kansas City still wins the division. You talk about ugly football. This was an ugly season. Um, if you had any of these Kansas City guys, now look, we said don't take the Kansas City wide receivers. At least I did, and that definitely played out to be true. I didn't really like the Kansas City backfield. You could have got games out of Pacheco. Obviously, Kelsey was the number one tight end taken off the board. Not the number one tight end in NFL this year. We'll talk about that. And Mahomes, I got some stats for Mahomes that's going to blow your mind. I'll ruin one for you right now. Mahomes, his best score is 21 since week 8. Everything else has been below 20 points since week 8, fantasy wise. Not your fantasy QB1 by any stretch of the imagination. The Raiders played better than anybody thought, although we kind of nailed their score, so maybe not. We just thought Denver was going to do a lot better, as you can see, but that matchup, the Peyton Russell thing didn't work out so well. And the Chargers, even in week 18, they can't win anything. They will find a way to lose. Um, we thought they might get a couple more wins this year. I don't know. We'll see who the new coach is down there. But there's your AFC West. I suppose it played out exactly how it's supposed to in the fact that it was Kansas City and nobody else, and that's what we thought.
Yeah, I mean, the Broncos were a team that I picked as a playoff team before the season started. When they went on their hot streak in the middle of the season, it looked like they were going to be on their way to the playoffs. And then it all crashed and burned late, with the Russell Wilson stuff and him getting benched. And apparently it's for financial reasons and a big mess. Look, mess is just a great word to describe this entire division this year.
Yeah.
The Chargers, the Broncos, the Raiders, complete mess of a season for all three of those teams.
All four.
The
All
Chargers and
four.
Raiders, they lose their quarterbacks, they lose their coach. The Broncos are benching their quarterback. And then the Chiefs, it hasn't been a mess for the Chiefs. It's been a little bit of a circus with all, the Kelsey and Swift stuff and all of that. But the
Yeah.
Chiefs are not the Chiefs that we remember from the last few years. So they've taken a step backwards, though they still won the division pretty easily. And they're going to be hosting another playoff game this week. They do not look like the Chiefs that we remember that has 2 Super Bowl rings. But now that it's the playoffs, who wants to play the Chiefs right now either, now that Mahomes is in the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to play Mahomes in the postseason, but I'm less scared of them this year. But maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's where people are gonna like really screw up is being less scared of these
Mm-hmm.
guys. If you watch us on Instagram, make sure you follow us on Instagram over at that effing show. We told you about all the players to watch this week, who is going to try and earn some money. We talked about the incentives. Chris Jones was one of them. He needed half a sack. He got it, and you would have thought everybody got paid when he got it. Everybody really happy for him. Uh, the whole sideline just erupted when he got that
Well, it
sack.
shows you
So
what he means to that locker room, right?
absolutely, absolutely shows what they think about him as a team. So congratulations, Chris Jones, for doing that. Let's get to let's get this wrapped up so we can get to the stats. So on the season, again, we predicted every game, every record, watched it all play out. First of all, we did phenomenal. Someone had to win, and hey, what can I say? I didn't do it. I didn't pull it off. It was Adam by 2 games. Adam pulls it off. Congratulations, my friend. I got more division winners. I got more correct on the division winners, but I kind of made that stat up just so I could feel a little better about myself. You get the season 167 and 105 to 165 and 107. Still, that is a phenomenal job. Not knowing the injuries, not knowing all the QB1s that were going to go down, especially Aaron Rodgers, not knowing anything, predicting this entire season before it ever started. 167 and 105. I'll take that. I'll take my 165 every day that ends in Y. Home team came out 159 to 113. Um, again, congratulations, NFL writer Adam Hulse.
Look, I mean, the 2 things I'll say about it is that it sets the bar very high for next year because those records are absolutely ridiculous when you consider all of the unknown factors that we tried to have to take into account for this. And the other thing is the thing I referenced, I think it was last week or the week before, where, sometimes less is more when it comes to analyzing, right? Sometimes when you get too deep into breaking down a particular game, you're almost making it harder on yourself to pick. So maybe there's something to that with the way we did it this year too.
Join us next season. We will do it. We will start in the summer. We do 1 division a week and start cranking them out. We keep the episode short. We get to business, but join us. Do it along with us. See how you do it. See how well you do, and hopefully we'll beat this next. We'll beat these records next season. But that's how it came out. It was a lot of fun to do. Again, join us next season and do it again. Let's get into the stats that you want. These are the stats from 18, but we're also going to get into the stats for the season. So don't worry, we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about how you use those stats to change the way you play fantasy football. And we're going to do it all season long. We're going to break things down in a way that maybe you never thought of before, and we're going to help you win games. But this week, week 18, 37 QBs played, which is up. Which is expected in week 18. 24 through touchdowns, which is down 2 from last week. Two QBs ran one. One of those QBs made the top 10. We will obviously talk about that in a second. Two quarterbacks scored 4 or more touchdowns this week. Try to figure out who these are. So we're going to play Name That Stat this week. We're going to play with you guys at home. So if you know the answer, chime in. And we're going to play with Adam. So Adam's going to have to be on his toes for this one. But number one in pass yards this week at 396. We're not going to do the answers yet. When I get to the list, which is the next slide, I will remind you of these stats, and we can decide together who we think they are, even though I already know the answer. So you're going to want to be on my team on this one. QB5 was number one in yards. Not 4, not 3, not 2, not 1. QB5 had the most yards. Number one in rush yards was 77. That was QB17. Got any guesses, Adam, on QB17? I know that's pretty far out, but I'll let you guess if you have one because of the most rush yards. It was not Fields. It was not Fields, which was a good guess. Wait till you hear the running back stats coupled with this one. I'm just going to throw that in there. QB17 was actually Stitt from the Chargers. So, Chargers QB number one in rush yards.
Look, man, week 18, it's 18. That's weird week for fantasy because most people aren't playing fantasy in week 18. It's a weird week for the NFL because a lot of people aren't playing in NFL games either. So week 18, always a weird one.
Good old Easton. DFS play, though, still in play. Number one for interceptions. We had 7 quarterbacks with 2 interceptions. Why? Because they were trying to win games. That's what interceptions tell us. We're going to prove that in 2 slides. We're going to prove why interceptions are not necessarily a bad thing. All right. Of those 7, QB4 and QB5 both had 2 interceptions. I'll remind you of that stat, but when we play Name That Stat here in just a second. Number one in sacks. Who got sacked 7 times? It was QB32. He got sacked 7 times. Maybe you caught this game. Let us know before the answer comes out. Adam, do you know who got sacked 7 times in week 18? Adam has no idea. He's running numbers through his head. He's like, I have no clue right now who it was. It was Billy Zappi in New England. Gets sacked 7 times in one game. Gosh, I don't even want to finish that game. Number one in pass touchdowns with 4. QBs 1 and 3. That's a little more expected, and we'll talk about who those were in just a second. 3 QBs had double-digit rushing attempts. 3 QBs had double-digit rushing attempts, and 2 of those made the top 10. That's why it's significant. And lastly, the last couple things we got here for you. 4 QBs went over 300. QBs 4 through 6 made the top 10 at plus 300. Those are 3 of the 4. They filled the 4 through 6 spot. We're going to talk about who is it. 3 QBs, and Adam, I'm going to let you try and guess on this one. 3 QBs over 80% completion, minimum 20%. Who had the highest with an over 90% completion rate? Went 18 of 20.
I mean, I know Dak had a very good completion percentage this week, but I don't know if that was him who did that. Let me think.
Beep, beep, beep.
Well, not Dak. I don't know. If it's not Dak, I don't know. Like, I know Dak was over 80. I don't know about who was at the top.
Mason, guide me through the night. Rudolph, take me to the playoffs, baby. Mason Rudolph gets it done. He only 153 yards. Like, again, it's only 18 of 20, but ends up with a 90% completion rate for this week. I'll take it. Going to the playoffs. I don't know if he's going to start in the playoffs. I don't know if they're like, saving Pickett or if they went ahead and make a change. I don't know if, he knows either for that matter. But yes, Mason Rudolph with the 90% completion. Dak Prescott was second at 86%. So that was a good guess.
Yeah.
That was a nice guess. So let's get into the top 10. Again, I'm going to remind you some of these stats. Try to figure out who they were. QB10. QB10 is a quarterback that we told you could do well because of who they were playing. Got a guess, Adam?
Told
Told
you
you
you could
last
do it
week this
because of
guy could do it.
Tyrod Taylor.
Bam! Nailed it. Tyrod Taylor. Number
Look,
9.
fade the Eagles, right? Like,
Yeah.
play quarterbacks and receivers against the Eagles all the time. Like, if you're in your, like, doing DFS or fantasy for the playoffs, play guys on offense against the Eagles. You don't have to play running backs. That's a different story. They're, not as reliable. Quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends, start them against the Eagles.
We'll see that as we go through. And Adam is 100% right. We're going to talk about fantasy people to play in the playoffs, obviously. Number 9, 5 out of the last 6 weeks in the top 10. Not many quarterbacks can say that.
5 of the last 6 weeks in the top 10. Josh Allen.
Jake Browning.
Oh.
Jake Browning came to play. He came to play. All right. He gets it done in the last week. 5 of the last 6 weeks in the top 10. QB 8 was Geno Smith. Barely comes out with a win. You said it. You said regression. You said it way back in the preseason. You were spot on. That's what we got out of Geno Smith, regression. Next year will be the toss-up. Which way is the scale going to tilt? Because they have so much dang talent on that team. We'll see. Number 7. Number 7 could be the rookie of the year. Pretty easy to figure that one out.
CJ Stroud.
Absolutely. The guy making a case for himself. QB 6. All right, now remember, QB 6, 5, and 4 all had plus 300, so we can start there. All right, QB 6, plus 300 yards, division winner in the playoffs, playing this weekend. Do you have a guess?
I already guessed him once, but I'll guess him again. Josh Allen.
Jared Goff. Not a bad guess, but Jared Goff is your boy. Number 5. Number 5, he was a guy. He was number 1 in pass yards. All right. He did have 2 interceptions, and they lost. Number 1 in pass yards, but they lost.
Number 1 in pass yards, 2 interceptions, and they lost.
Mm-hmm. Think about who balled out, even though they lost. First time on the list.
Trevor Lawrence?
First time on the list.
First time on the list. Desmond Ritter? No, but that wouldn't be his first time on the list.
Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins,
yeah.
Huge.
Well, that's the other one. Start your quarterbacks, receivers, and tight ends against the Lions.
Right.
That's the other one. I should have known.
That's why this Lions-Rams game is going to be fantastic, because it's going to be offense. It's going to be awesome to watch. Number 4 was Josh Allen. You guessed him a few times. Number 4, he got all the way up to number 4. A great game in Miami. Number 3, 4 passing touchdowns. 4 passing touchdowns for QB3. It is, in fact, Dak Prescott. Number 2 was one of the 2 guys that had a rushing touchdown. All right. But he only had 163 pass yards. Ends up at QB2, only 163 pass yards. And he ran.
Kyler Murray.
Carson Wentz.
Oh.
Carson Wentz. First time on the list as well. Wow. Carson Wentz. And your number 1 with 4 passing touchdowns. Won the game, but it was all for naught.
Derek Carr.
It's all over the board. Derek Carr, I had to give him.
That's your Derek Carr for you. He'll light it up, and it won't matter anyway.
But look, Derek Carr had some good games down the stretch. If you're looking for fantasy points, a good fantasy player, we're going to talk about that, because I told you we're going to change the way you play fantasy football, and we're going to show you all that. And this is what I'm talking about. Let's talk about some of the season stats, and then I'm going to show you how this all correlates to changing the way you think about how you play fantasy football. 10 QBs over 4,000 yards. Only 8 of them made the top 10, but we had 10 QBs over 4,000 yards. I don't know if that's the record, but I mean, what it does is it demonstrates how the game has changed, how this is the passing game. Most sack quarterback, Adam, at 65. Let me finish this
out.
Least sack quarterback, played in all 17 games, 24. Least sack. played in all
Mahomes.
27 games. Most interceptions are the same two guys.
Most intercept Sam Howell.
And Sam Howell was the most sacked and had the most interceptions. Number 2 was the least
I said him already for
and
sacks.
had the most interceptions. What's that?
I said him already for sacks. Oh, what?
Yeah, you did. No, you did. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Yes. So Sam Howell's number 1 in sacks and interceptions. Who's number 2 in interceptions and also ended up with the least amount of sacks?
Number 2 in interceptions and also had the least amount of sacks.
Catching crap for his interceptions.
Josh Allen.
Josh Allen. That's your guy. Most rush touchdowns. We have 2. There's 2 guys that had 15 rushing touchdowns.
Allen and Hurts.
Bam, you got him. Dead on. Allen and Hurts. 15. You would have thought it'd be Fields. Allen and Hurts. And it wasn't close. It was not close. The next 2 guys on the rushing.
Well, they were, healthy too. They were healthy too, Allen and Hurts. Fields was not healthy. Makes a difference.
No, it does. And he missed a lot of games to do that. Next in line was Josh Dobbs with 6. So it goes from 15 for 2 guys to 6 with Josh Dobbs. Lamar Jackson had 5, if you were thinking he might have been on the list as well. Only 9 quarterbacks played in all 17 games. We talked about this earlier in the show. 6 had 16, so that means only 15 quarterbacks essentially made it the whole season. I'll count 16 games. I'll give you 1. Maybe you got sat for something. Who knows? Maybe you got sat in week 18 or in the week 17. I don't know. But I'll give you the 16. But only not even half the league made it the whole season. That is actually not surprising to me. I'm actually kind of surprised it was so high.
And you're right. That 16 has to be the number. Like Mahomes, for example, he sat in the last week of the season, but he didn't miss any time before that. They sat him by choice, not because they had to.
Exactly. 8 quarterbacks above 300 fantasy points. So obviously you wanted one of those guys going through the stretch, but we'll talk about how it wasn't those 8 that were necessarily the most valuable. That's on the next slide. That's what I'm talking about, how we're going to change the way you play fantasy. This next slide is going to be the one that does it, and it's because of that number and how it correlates to the best fantasy backs this season. 1 quarterback went over 400. QB1, we all know who that is. That was Josh Allen. And 42 total quarterbacks made the top 10 list this season. 42 out of 32. I think that's understandable, especially with all the injuries. I think 42 out of 32 is pretty good. Low diversity. So that's how that came out. All right, the best fantasy quarterbacks. Now, look, this is a process that we're going to do the entire offseason. We're not going to go through this whole list right now, but we're going to show you what we're talking about. Who fills number 3? All right, now, Lamar Jackson actually finished as QB4. So why is he fantasy QB most valuable number 3? He had 9 games. Well, he had 9 games plus 20 points. He had 3 games plus 30 points, okay, including the last 4. So this is where the real value comes in. He was valuable all season long, but down your stretch, when you're in your playoff run, because if you had Lamar Jackson, you played your roster right, it probably, you probably made the playoffs. Thank you very much, Josh Bainey says, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Fox. I appreciate you, my friend. But Lamar Jackson's, your playoff run, for your quarterfinals, he got you 20 points. For your semi, he got you 23. And for your final, for your championship, he got you 36. So that's why he comes in at number 3 above number 4. All right. Next up, number 2, Jalen Hurts. Now, why is Jalen Hurts number 2 as opposed to Josh Allen as your number 1? Both Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen balled out. Allen had 13 games at plus 20. Hurts had 15 games plus 20. Again, consistency all the way through. But Allen had plus 20 in 4 of his last 5. All right? Whereas Hurts in week 14 only got you 9 points. That could have hurt. Allen also had 2 games plus 30. Allen also is the only fantasy back to go plus 40. Both these guys had 2 or more touchdowns in 16 games. I'm not mad if you want to switch these 2 up, all right? But Allen in your playoff, and this is why. Allen in your playoff run in the quarterfinal game, he got you 16, but then he got you 26 and 20. Whereas Hurts got you above 20 every time, 24, 24, and 20 in losing efforts. So I'm okay if you want to swap the values for those. Those are your number two guys. But the real question comes in, and I don't think I'm really reaching here on those guys, but the real question comes in, who are the other ones? And this is what I'm talking about, changing the way you play fantasy football. When we fill in these names, and we're going to fill these names in the coming weeks during the playoffs, going through the offseason, we're going to show you why the names that should be there. But off the top of your head, Adam, what are some names that you would think would go in this spot, in these couple of spots here?
I mean, we talked about Mahomes having a down year, but I'm sure he's
Absolutely.
up there. Jordan Love, I know, is going to be somewhere in that top 10 with the fantastic season that he had. I mean, if you're talking about, later in the year being more important than earlier in the year, a guy like Matthew Stafford, absolutely Matthew Stafford, down the stretch, he was unbelievable in the second half of this season. Dak Prescott, too, of course, very slow start to the year. He went through a stretch where he had I think it was 5 games in 6 weeks where he finished in the top 3. When you get stuff like that from some of those guys, those are the names I'm looking for.
Absolutely. So you're going to see names. Those are the names that are going to come up. You're talking about Prescott. Prescott had a great middle of the season, like you talked about. He had 4 out of 5 games. And really, it was because of the bye week. He went 4 games in a row inside the top 3. But then, and he goes in the top 3, 6 out of 7. But then at the end of the season, it kind of dies off. And so that doesn't help your fantasy matchup as you go through. So he gets downgraded a little bit. For your fantasy run, Prescott's not really going to help you to win that ship. But you brought up Jordan Love. Jordan Love for your quarterfinals only got you 17, but for your semi and your ship, he got you 24 and 28. Jordan Love, 9 games above 20. But his middle of the season, weeks 5 through 10, they were horrible. So he gets downgraded for that. The guys that are really up there, we talked about Lamar Jackson. He's on the list. Fields only gets you 12 points for your quarterfinals, but if you happen to have him on your roster for the semi and the ship, 26 and 25 also counts in DFS, right? Joe Flacco is someone you would want it on your roster as you made your final playoff run. He's someone that was attainable as well. Joe Flacco made that top 10 list in 4 of the last 5 weeks. Obviously, he didn't play last week. The 4 weeks that matter, he made that top 10 list for your quarterfinals, semis, and championship. He went 20, 27, and 24. Those are numbers that help you win. So he gets ranked up. You talked about Mahomes. Mahomes, like we said, his best game was 21 points since week 8. Mahomes was not somebody that helped you win much of anything. Tua, Hill had a fantastic season. Tua only went plus 20 in 4 games. And again, not since week 8. So these numbers are going to be deceiving. When you go to draft next year, we're going to make sure that you're not looking at guys like Mahomes and Tua with drunken glasses, okay? We're going to bring it down to earth. And this doesn't say they're going to go down this far, but you've got to look at what they have. Kansas City's going to have to make changes. Tua did exactly what he was supposed to do. That doesn't make him a great fantasy back. Josh, do we think that Tampa Bay is going to have a chance against the Eagles? I do. Do you know why? Because Baker Mayfield, in his last few games, the quarterfinals gave you 20 points. In the semifinals, gave you 20 points. In the ship, he gave you 18 points, which is close to 20, but he played well. And that is the point. He played well in those games. And now they have the Philadelphia Eagles. So do I think Tampa has a shot against the Eagles? I 100% think Tampa has a shot against the Eagles. And let's not forget that Tampa's at home. Rashad White has turned it on. We're going to get into his stats in a second. Mike Evans, we're going to talk about him in just a second. The stats, the numbers, they are there to support the fact that, yes, absolutely think Tampa has a shot against Philly.
They absolutely have a shot against Philly. If you've watched Philly play over the last 6 weeks of the season, every team in the NFL would have a shot against Philly right now. They just ended the year by losing to the Giants and the Cardinals in games that were must win to keep them alive in the division. And I know that the Bucks are kind of, stumbling their way into the playoffs too. But over the last 6 weeks, the Eagles are 1-5 and on paper have been statistically one of the worst teams in the NFL, especially defensively. During that time, they ranked 31st in yards allowed and 31st in points allowed. Disaster right now.
Absolute disaster. And Baker Mayfield, aside from week 18, we'll take week 18 out of it. Carolina, they just had a hard time. It's a division game. Let's throw week 18 out. Why am I going to throw 18 out? Because in week 14, he threw 3 touchdowns. In week 15, he threw 4. In week 16, he threw 2. Week 17, he threw 2. He's got 2 games in that stretch over 300. The guy is on a tear. He's only thrown 2 interceptions in that span as well over those last 4 games. Take the Carolina game out. Philly better watch out because Tampa is going to give them a game for absolutely. And I absolutely believe Tampa could win that game. To answer your question, Josh, do I want Josh says, Baker, you want to. Yeah, I do. And I was trashing Baker all season long. Adam will tell you I was not a believer. I'm still not sure I'm a believer like all the way, but he can get it done. I believe in that.
Look, he's playing the Eagles passing defense, so he's going to go off for 350 and 3 touchdowns. The question is just, can the Eagles answer and keep up against a Bucks passing defense that hasn't been good either? So, interesting matchup there.
Indeed. Let's get into more of these stats that you want. Look, go to Armchair Athletics, joins the Fox Force. We got a New Year special running on the Fox Force. The price has been reduced to include the entire season. Go there, see what the price is. You're not going to believe the price in the first place. It's going to take you the entire season and the off season, 1 year for the price to join the Fox Force. We're going to have all these stats, all these newsletters, everything coming straight to you. Over at armchairathletics.com. Click on the Fox Force link and go over there and join. We're going to carry you through, and we're going to retrain your brain on how to play fantasy, and you're going to come out with a lot more wins. You're going to love it, and it's not going to cost you hardly anything to do it. You won't believe it. Go over there and check it out. Running backs for week 18. We had 8 running backs go over 100. 4 went over 150. Running backs stepped up this week. I mean, that's just what happens. 17 running backs had rushing touchdowns. RB4, remember this stat, RB4 only had a receiving touchdown. Good enough for RB4, did not have a rushing touchdown. It gets fun when we get into that. Again, we're going to play Name That Stat in just a second. 4 had 2 or more touchdowns. 3 made the top 10. Of those 4, 3 of them made the top 10. One guy had 2 touchdowns, did not make the top 10. It's week 18. 70 running backs had rushing attempts, and only 9 had 20 plus rushing attempts though. So out of all those guys, and you're really passing the ball around. Then when you consider that 9 had 20 and 8 went over 100, 9 had 20 rushing attempts, 8 went over 100. There you go. Number 1 in rush yards, 188. That's running back 3. I'll remind you of this when we play Name That Stat in just a second. Number 1 in receiving yards, had 7 catches for 103. That's RB4. Remember, he had no rushing touchdowns. Still finishes RB4. That's why. 7 catches for 103. That's 17 points right there. Number 1 in attempts, 37 for 178. That's RB2. That's not even RB1. Remember, look at these stats. RB1's not there yet. All right. Number 1 in receptions with 7. Again, RB4 had that. So did RB10 and RB24. RB10 had 0 touchdowns, period. RB4 only caught 1. RB10 had 0. Still good enough to make the list. RB24 up there, number 1 reception with 7. That was Javonte Williams. Titans had 2 in the top 10. Not hard to figure out who those are when I say there's 2, but they had 2 against the Jags. And here we go. Number 10, Javonte Williams. Already gave you that one. All right, 8 and 9. 9 and 8 are your Tennessee running backs. Mr. King Henry, thanks for all the hard work, and Tajay Spears, both running backs in the same game against the Jags. Thank you, boys, for getting my Steelers in and helping them push past. Now, Adam, we had number 7. Number 7 is the only running back this week with 2 rushing touchdowns. 2 rushing touchdowns, the only one. Folks at home, if you have a guess, get it in. Now's the time. Type fast. Only running back with 2 rushing touchdowns.
Was it Saquon?
Was it Saquon? Bamski. Yes, it was Saquon. Saquon comes in at number 7, 2 rushing touchdowns. Only guy. It kind of amazes me, even in the receiver room and the running back room when we have so many that only have 1 touchdown and yet they're in the top 10 leaderboard. You would expect more from that, but we've kind of broken that down all season, why it's that way and what is important. Number 6, Najee Harris. Thank you very much for using him the way you have, and he's really come through. Najee has come clutch in the last couple games with Mason Rudolph in there, allowing Mason to do just enough. Just toss it to Pickens and Deontay and call it a day. Number 5, Joe Mixon. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Joe Mixon has to be one of the biggest surprises, like sleepy, quiet, top running backs in the NFL this year.
I mean, he's not talked about at all, but he's just been consistently solid all year long.
It's crazy how well he did. Number 4. Number 4 had 28 yards. 28 yards. And 1 receiving touchdown. Number 1 in receptions. Number 1 in receiving yards. 28 yards rushing. Who was number 4, Adam?
I know it, because a lot of people were throwing a fit about that long receiving touchdown that he had earlier in the game. And they said, where the hell has this been in the weeks that really mattered? Right. And that is Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, he's not the only, everybody literally was having a fit at the end of that game. We'll talk about that in just a second.
And then his dynasty owners threw a party when they announced that Arthur Smith was officially fired.
100%. They didn't even wait. That Arthur Smith firing happened at like
12:02 a.m. 12:02 a.m. They press released it.
Because I got the notification.
Arthur Blank could not wait to get that press release out that we are getting rid of this guy. He couldn't wait. It took him 2 minutes after the day changed to say, okay, it's done. Get him out of here.
And it took less than that. I mean, he had him on the phone. Like, hold on, Art. Hold on. 10. Okay, 5, 4. All right, you're fired. And then the press release came out. Like, that's how much, yeah. Deservedly so. Number 3, Jonathan Taylor. Rush yards 30 for 188. Just ridiculous. Number 2 went 37 for 178. Most attempts this week. What do you think?
I know this one too, because it's another guy that a lot of his owners and the fans of his team were also kind of asking, where has this kind of been all year? Because it's a guy who's been up and down with the disasters of this offense, and it is Big Bad Brees.
And it's not really his fault, right? I mean, 100%.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that when your quarterback goes down. 29 points in week 18, 28 points in week 17, 43 points in week 16. These last couple weeks, he has earned his paycheck. And of course, yeah, it is Breece Hall. And number 1, only running back to go over 30 points this week. The only name not on this list yet, Adam, who's number 1?
It's James Conner, a guy who was fantastic in each of the last 2 weeks of this season. James Conner with a hell of a finish to this year.
I think it's fair to say, where the hell was that all season as well, right? I mean,
for sure. But he was not as high of a profile guy as Breece and Bijan, who were going in the first or second round of pretty much all fantasy drafts. Conner, the expectations weren't as high for as those 2 guys. But yes, definitely fair to say about Conner as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about the season with the running backs. CMC finished 100 fantasy points ahead of RB2. That's the season that CMC had. And we talk about consensus number 1s, and depending on if you what you looked at, what you thought, it was either Eckler or CMC. I feel like Eckler was more the fantasy number 1 consensus because people weren't sure about the injuries with CMC. I don't know. That's up for debate, but the number one usually does not finish well. Um, and I've thrown those stats up over the last 11 years where number one has landed, and it hasn't been great. Um, if you had CMC number one, then he's there. But I think Eckler really was rated number one. Anyway, CMC finishes 100 fantasy points ahead of RB2. I think that's absolutely ridiculous, because especially considering that you've got Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle all over 1,000 yards as well. I think that's phenomenal. RB2 scored 44% of their points in 4 of the last 5 games. Who's RB2, Adam? You there, Adam? I don't think Adam can hear us. RB2 finished with 290, and he scored 44% of those in 4 of the last 5 games. That's the same guy we were just talking about. That's Breece Hall. Breece Hall finishes at RB2, but he gets 44% of his points in just 4 games. That's there you go. RB3 went over.
Well, I guess he made him count when it mattered, right? Like he waited, he said, look, if you were able to make the playoffs without me, I'm going to reward you for me being on your roster while you're there. Like, sorry about the inconsistencies this year, but if we made it there together, I'm going to reward you for it.
If you just hung on and had the wherewithal to play him. RB3 went over 57 yards one time since week 10. He's only had 4 touchdowns since week 10.
I think I know it.
But he still finishes as RB3.
Mostert.
It is in fact. Oh, it is not in fact Mostert. I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking.
It's not.
It is not. This guy has been a top running back all season long, but kind of quietly, and he's obviously fallen off towards the end, but did enough at the beginning of the season to end up as RB3.
ETN?
ETN. You got it, my friend. That's the guy. 12 1,000 rushers. 6 of them made the top 10. So just because you got 1,000 yards, you make the top 10. Half of those 1,000-yard rushers make the top 10. 8 of them actually make the playoffs. So 1,000 yards, doesn't mean what it used to anymore as far as fantasy. 8 running backs had double-digit rushing touchdowns. The most was RB5. RB5 had the most touchdowns with 18. Most rushing touchdowns with 18. Got a guess on that one, Adam? Oh, you lost Adam for a second.
That was Mostert, right?
That was indeed Mostert.
Yeah.
100%. RB1 and RB5 had 21 total touchdowns. That means McCaffrey and Mostert combined, rushing and receiving, both had 21 total touchdowns. Those are your top guys for touchdowns. Henry had 0 receiving touchdowns. I didn't even make that one a mystery because that one just shocked me that Henry had 0 receiving touchdowns. He finishes at RB8 with 0 receiving touchdowns. So,
well, that's what Spears is for.
I guess so. I guess you're right. 50 running backs made the top 10 list in 2023. You mentioned in previous weeks how surprising a number that was for you. I agree. Not a lot of consistency, and we've broken that down, and we will continue to break that down in the offseason, but not a lot of guys stringing them together, which I think shows the importance of matchups, which is why when I talk about changing the way you play fantasy, that's one of the big underlying factors there. But yeah, 50 running backs made the top 10, and I know that's shocking to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, and like how many differences we've seen week to week. I don't know if I'd necessarily say it was shocking, with the way the NFL is now, with the workhorse running back kind of going out the window at this point, and more teams using multiple backs. And now it's like a full workload for a lot of running backs is 15 touches. Like a few years back, it used to be 25 to 30 for your leading running back. Now it's like 15 to 20. So that's a pretty significant decrease in that.
It is. This is one of the ones we talk about changing the way you play fantasy, changing the way you think on draft day when you're running all these numbers and stuff. This is something that a lot of people don't take into account. Look, Of the top 10, RBs 2 and 6 are the only ones that play in the northern U.S., and they're the only two that play outside. All other 8 play in the South and or in a dome, but they all play in the South. The other 8 all play in the South, dome or not. Only 2 running backs in the top 10 play north of the Mason-Dixie line and outside. And actually, there was only 1 running back that played north of the Mason-Dixie line. There was 1 other running back, that plays in the north, but he plays in a dome. Dome running backs make sense. Rack up the yards. And you got to look at the rest of the schedule as well. How many other games do they play in a dome? Those are stats that we're going to break down for you as we change the way you play fantasy football. But I thought that was kind of a shocking stat. But when I first put it down, but honestly, you look at it, it makes absolute sense.
It makes sense, but it's still a pretty shocking number. And that's something that I don't think many people factor into their decisions in fantasy football drafts. But you have data right now that proves that they should be taking that into consideration.
100%. RB2 and 4 had 9 total touchdowns. That's it. You talk about Mostert, CMC having 21 in the top 10, 4 and 9. They only had 9 total touchdowns. And number 8, that was Bijan, only had 8 total touchdowns, and yet still performed good enough to get in the top 10. That kind of blew my mind a little bit as well. Number 4 being Rachaad White. He finishes at RB4. All right. Again, only 9 total touchdowns. You had Bijan with only 8 total touchdowns. But here's the thing. Running back 4 had 549 receiving yards. Running back 2 had 591 receiving yards. Okay. Breece Hall only had 9 touchdowns this season. Right, but we talked about how he got 44% of his points in the last 4 games. And then you had Bijan had 487 receiving yards. Bijan didn't even go over 1,000. But consistency across the board, he ends up at RB9 with close to. He had 976, but there you go. Boom. So let's talk about wide receivers. 27 wide receivers caught touchdowns this week. That's about on par. 6 receivers went over 100, also about on par, but 2 receivers went over 190. Woo! Automatically, you should know who those people are. Only 1 ran one in. Adam, I am going to ask you who you think ran it in, but I'll ask you on the top 10 list. So, do you know?
It wasn't CeeDee Lamb.
It was not CeeDee Lamb. It was not. There we go. Exactly like last week, 9 had double digits, only 2 had double-digit receptions. But the percentages this week were absolutely off the charts. 6 wide receivers had 2 touchdowns. 3 of them made the top 10. Number 1 receiving yards went for 195, and he wasn't even wide receiver 1. He was wide receiver 3. We're going to name that stat. This is what I was talking about. Number 1 interceptions went 13 of 13. That was wide receiver 2 because he had 0 touchdowns. 13 to 13 with 0 touchdowns, still ends up wide receiver 2. Wide receivers 1 and 3 had 30-plus fantasy points. That doesn't happen a lot. But not number 2. Number 2 didn't. 1 and 3 did. So let's get into the top 10 list on wide receivers and see who these people are. Name that stat, folks. Number 10 had the most top 10 finishes for the entire season. Adam.
Tyreek Hill.
Absolutely. Still pulls off number 10, despite the loss. I thought they could have used him a little more. I know they used him a lot.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Number 9, 3 touchdowns, most this week, 2 receiving, 1 running. He's the one that had the running touchdown. Do you know maybe for most touchdowns? Maybe that's a clue. Though I don't think it is. I'm not gonna make you spend a ton of brain power on this one because it's out there.
Is it Calvin Ridley?
It is Jacoby Myers. Myers had 3 touchdowns this week. Yeah. Quietly.
Very quietly.
Numbers 5 through 7, 5, 6, 7 in true Week 18 fashion are all new to the list. Number 8 was Calvin Ridley. Sorry. Number 7, David Bell. Nice touchdown,
Mm.
too. Yeah, nice one. Quez Watkins, who people thought would be on this list a lot more this year. And Dontavian Wicks. Dontavian Wicks is someone. Green Bay has a ridiculous wide receiver core. Their running room
Sure
sucks,
do.
but good night they have a receiving
And they're
core.
like all under 25.
And they, with Jordan Love throwing the ball, watch out in Green Bay. I'm just saying. Number four,
Not this year.
not well, they made the playoffs at least. Number four, 144 on and one touchdown on 7 receptions. He had a 20.6 average this week.
Was it Nico? Nico Collins?
It was not Nico. It was AJ Brown.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. He did better than you think in their loss. Number 3, 9 for 9. 100% catch rate, 9 for 9. 195. 21.7 per. 195, 9 for 9.
Well, that's got to be Nico.
It's got to be Nico. There you go, Josh. I knew you knew who it was, Josh. Nico Collins balling out. Josh, let me tell you something. Ford Flex. Josh Bandy called Nico Collins. Josh Trey. Well, actually, I think Josh was the one who was up, and I think Trey wasn't. Anyway, fourth and flex. They said Nico Collins, and they were absolutely right. Number 2, 443 yards in the last 3 games. I could name off stats on this guy for like an hour this week. He's number 2 this week. 443 yards in the last 3 games. Adam. Oh, we just lost Adam. He knows who this is. You know who this is. CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has 443 yards in the last 3 games. We're going to talk about where he finished. We're going to talk about his season-long stats. 443 yards in 3 games. Absolutely ridiculous. CeeDee Lamb is on a tear, and Dallas plays at home. Go ahead. Bet against him if you want to, at least for this first game or 2. And number 1, 192 yards this week, 12 of 14, showing people who is arguably the best wide receiver in all of football, and he did it in a loss with a backup quarterback. A backup to a backup quarterback. Who was number 1, Adam?
Another one of those guys, a little bit frustrating this year, not due to performance, but due to injuries. But he came on strong at the end, and that is Justin Jefferson.
Absolutely. No reason to wait on the button. I mean, clues are all aboard, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's an obvious one. Justin Jefferson busting the gritty for you. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is the story with all he's done over the last 4. Nico Collins, one of the, success stories as the entire Houston Texans team is. But Justin Jefferson, making sure you don't forget about him. 192 on 12 receptions, 12-14, only missed 2 balls this week. There you go. For this week's top 10. Let's talk about some season stats for wide receiver. Only one receiver went over 400 fantasy points. Just one guy. There's just one guy, really.
Tyreek Hill.
What's that?
Tyreek Hill.
Not Tyreek Hill. Not Tyreek Hill. Look, I understand Tyreek Hill being, and I would say a couple weeks ago, it was Tyreek Hill was the obvious number 1, but when you get 443 yards in the last 3 games, that's going to vault you up a little bit. When you get all those catches, he's had double-digit receptions like the last 3 weeks, and that's CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb destroyed this last half of the fantasy season, ends up at number 1.
It's insane how much I love CeeDee Lamb and how much I've shafted him on this show and not giving him. Yeah, right? Like, I mean, I love CeeDee Lamb. In my opinion, he's a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL, and he's starting to make his case to really move towards the top of that list with the way they've unlocked him in Dallas this season. But when big things come up, and I'm guessing a receiver, for some reason I've shafted CeeDee Lamb a couple times now.
Look, he's number 1, obviously, in fantasy. He's number 2 as there's a tie for the first spot. So secondly, he's got the second most touchdowns. He's second in yards by only 50, by exactly 50. He's second in yards. And he's number 2 in rushing touchdowns as well. So he's like number 5 in rush yards, but number 2 in rushing touchdowns. So number 1 in fantasy points. I mean, he's at the top of the list. You talk about top 3, yeah, 100%. Number 1 in a lot of those categories. You could make the statement that he's the number 1 fantasy receiver this year, and I don't think you get a lot of pushback. I know people want to say Tyreek Hill, but CeeDee Lamb has better overall stats. 26 wide receivers went over 1,000. I remember it was like a big deal. Even the sports card, 1,000-yard receiver. 26 of them did it this year. So, I mean, good for them. I'm not trying to take away what they did, but in this NFL, 3 went over 1,500 though, and I think that's probably a bigger stat to watch. 11 wide receivers were over 100 receptions. To include wide receiver number 1 had 135. You know which receiver had 135? It was not CeeDee Lamb. I will give you that right now.
Amon-Ra?
That's not fair. It was CeeDee Lamb. I was just jerking your chain.
Oh, come on.
Lamb. Look, CeeDee Lamb, because I've got to teach you a lesson here, Adam. Number 1 in receptions. I mean, top 3 in receiving yards. Number 2 in touchdowns. Number 1 in fantasy points. Stop sleeping on your boy. You're a Cowboys fan. What's wrong with you? You deserved it.
I love me some CeeDee Lamb.
So does everybody Adam this season.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 6 with 10 plus touchdowns. So 6 in the double digit categories. Wide receiver 2 and 7 had 13. Who are your top touchdown getters for fantasy this year, Adam? If you
was it Mike Evans?
Was it Mike Evans? Exactly, 100%. It was Mike Evans, and Tyreek Hill, of course, had 13 touchdowns this year. CeeDee Lamb with 12. Wide receiver 15 had 225 rush yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, both firsts for wide receivers. Still finishes a wide receiver 15. Still finishes with your 1,000 yards overall.
Well, it can really only be one of 2 guys, right? It's got to either be Debo or Derry Belt Debo.
Right? Derry Belt Debo. Still one of the best nicknames on the season.
Yes.
It is Derry Belt Devo. We're talking about Jaden Reed, finishes with 119 and 2. It is, in fact, the authentic Deebo Samuels, 225 and 5 touchdowns for wide receiver 15 overall. Only 3 of the top 10, just like the running backs, only 3 play in the northern U.S. They all play outside, but the other 7 all play in the South. 7 of the top 10 play in the South. These are things you want to look at next year when you're drafting. Where do they play? It's important. Wide receiver 8.
Very interesting trend to me. That's such an interesting trend to me.
It is.
And that's a good find.
And we're going to keep bringing that stuff to you. We're going to bring you all stuff like that. Head over to Armchair Athletics and join the Fox Force. It's like a ridiculous deal right now that includes the entire season. Come along for the ride. We're going to change the way you play fantasy football. We're going to give you all the stats, all the numbers, everything you want for pennies on the dollar. Wide receiver 8. This one was pretty amazing too. Wide receiver 8 finished with 108 receptions, 1,243 yards, 7 touchdowns, and he only played 13 games. And honestly, it's not the first time he's done this, but wide receiver 8, who was it with that stat line?
He only played in 13 games, 108, 1,243, and it has to be Jefferson.
It is not Jefferson, although Jefferson had a fantastic showing for the games. Keenan Allen, we've said it all year. Evans and Allen are the guys everybody sleeps on. They're fantasy monsters. I grab Allen every single freaking year. Even though I can't get a full season, I get 13.
We've talked a lot of Keenan Allen and Mike Evans this year because those are the 2 guys, and I guarantee when draft season gets here next year, the same narrative will be out there. Well, they're too old now, and the regression's coming, and blah, 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 blah. I've been hearing it for 5 years about both of them.
Yep. Keenan Allen. I will have him on my roster again. I almost guarantee it. 66 total wide receivers made the top 10 list in 2023. I actually think that's probably about right. Just the way receivers go around matchups, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, backup quarterbacks come in. I think that's probably about right. The running backs, I think, was a little high. I think wide receivers is probably good. All right. So that brings us into the playoffs. When the playoffs, everybody? No, it doesn't. I lied. I'm going to back that slide up because we have to hit the best part of the show. We have to do it. We got to do it before we talk playoffs. It's the Pulse with Hulse. All right, you guys are going to want to chime in here for the Pulse with Hulse as I take this down, bring this in, and even it out a little bit. 3 questions to the Adam Hulse. It's probably going to be a couple more. It's like a bunch of subcategories because we're gonna get into some stuff, and you guys are going to want to chime in on this. So chime in. But question number 1: bunch of coaches. There's vacancies. They couldn't wait to fire Arthur Smith. They literally could not wait. Talk about he got fired 12:02. Rivera, we knew was on the way out. Belichick, look, I mean, all signs pointing that he's going to go somewhere else amicably, an amicable split. They will split their 50-50. Well, that's the story they're going to tell. Chargers have a vacancy. Panthers have a vacancy. But with the guys that left, Art Smith, obviously, if Belichick leaves, he'll find a spot. Art Smith and Rivera out already. You had the Chargers, you had the Panthers, a bunch of assistant coaches. Are these guys going to find jobs again? Let's keep it easy. Let's do Art Smith and Ron Rivera. Will these guys find head coaching jobs for next year?
For Ron Rivera, I don't think so. I think his time has maybe come and gone at this point. The Commanders have gone backwards as years have gone by during his tenure with the Commanders. Look, nothing against Ron Rivera. I love Ron Rivera, but I just feel like if he does get another job, which I guess is possible, he's kind of just a placeholder, right? Like he's going to kind of be like a guy who can stabilize you for a couple years until they find a younger, more attractive option and go towards the future. Again, I'm a big fan of Ron Rivera. I respect the hell out of Ron Rivera. I like him as a coach, but it just seems like, he hasn't evolved with the times of what the head coaching position is in the NFL this day. He's more of the old school coach, which is kind of getting phased out.
Yeah. Art Smith, after his tantrum on the sidelines, why'd you do that? Because we're playing football. Quit being a whiner. He just knew he was about to get fired, and I think he was just mad about that.
Let me just say this. If Arthur Smith gets hired to be a head coach, that entire fan base is going to riot against the team that hires him as their head coach. So, no, I don't think Arthur Smith is getting another head coaching job right away. Look, let's be honest. He actually didn't do a terrible job with the Falcons. He had them right in the mix, and they just kind of missed out on the playoffs this year, despite getting some of the worst quarterback play in the entire NFL. So some could make the case that if the Falcons get their quarterback this year, they trade for Fields, draft a quarterback, whatever, all the different situations out there, that the Falcons can take a giant step forward. The issue with Arthur Smith is that he's not using his elite weapons. He throws the ball to Jonnu Smith more than Kyle Pitts. He hands it off to Tyler Algier more than Bijan Robinson. I saw a hilarious analogy about Arthur Smith, and they said basically Arthur Smith with the Falcons is Steve Kerr with the Warriors during the Splash Brother days if he ran the offense through Andrew Bogut and Festus Ezeli.
If the shoe fits, you got to wear it. And that's pretty accurate shoe. Straightforward, quarterbacks that are going to retire. Who's done? Or at least,
oh, wow,
getting shipped to the farm.
Wow, I mean, that's a good question.
Russell Wilson.
Off the top of no, he's not going to retire. Russell Wilson's not going to retire.
Was he going to get another starting job?
I do think he's probably going to get another starting job. And when it's all said and done, it might still be with the Broncos. As crazy as that sounds. Because what else are they going to do with him? Are they going to cut him? Are they going to trade him?
Money.
Who's trading for him right now? Nobody's trading for Russell Wilson right now. Are they going to cut him loose and eat the loss? I'm not so sure about that. I don't know. The Russell Wilson situation is definitely one to monitor. And let's be honest, too, he was not bad this year. Russell Wilson was not bad this season. Russell Wilson, to me, is not the reason that the Broncos didn't make the playoffs. He actually played pretty well and significantly better than he played last year.
QB 14, 26 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions. Gets ekes over the 3,000-yard mark. I mean, you could ask for worse. Sam Howell. Sam Howell had a fantastic stretch run down the middle. Took way too many sacks. Played way better than we thought. Only 56 yards short of 4,000. Did have 21 interceptions. Is Sam Howell starting in Washington? I mean, it's hard to say without knowing who the quarterback's
No
going to be.
chance.
No
No
chance.
chance.
Does he
No
get a job
chance.
somewhere else?
No. Sam Howell will be either a development project with the Commanders or somebody else. He'll be a backup. Look, Sam Howell to me is a great example of a guy who looks great from a fantasy perspective. But if you're not a fantasy football player, you're never going to mention really Sam Howell's name. He did nothing from an NFL perspective. Sure, he had some pack statting because of all the garbage time and this, that, and whatever. But again, classic example to me of fantasy star at times, especially during that crazy stretch when he was a top 10 every single week. But he was never in the conversation of being a top 10 quarterback, just fantasy football.
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Kirk Cousins' situation with the Vikings, it 100% to me comes down to what Justin Jefferson wants, right? If I'm the owner of the Vikings, the general manager, whoever's making that decision, I'm sitting down with Justin Jefferson and straight up asking him, do you want us to bring back Kirk or do you want us to go in a different direction? What will make you happy? What will give us a better chance of keeping you for the long term? You're our guy. We're building around you. We want you here forever. What quarterback do you want?
Tannehill.
No, Tannehill's done. He's going to be a career backup from this point forward. Sure, I mean, I guess he could retire if he
does
doesn't.
He retire? Yeah, that's. Yeah.
I mean, look, like I could see Tannehill retiring. That wouldn't surprise me unless he wants to go and be a backup. It's kind of a like Matt Ryan type of situation, right? Like Matt Ryan could have continued to be a backup quarterback. His pride wouldn't really let him do that, and then he landed the CBS job, which is good for him. I don't know if that's the route Tannehill's going to go, but nobody's giving Tannehill a starting job next year.
I was going to ask about like backup quarterbacks or like, okay, I'm kind of done and hang it up. There might be a couple, but honestly, if you can make league minimum, which is like over $750,000, then I mean, why retire? Why not just collect a paycheck unless you're just really tired of the whole circus that is the NFL? But for $750,000, that I'd put up with a lot for that.
Yeah, but a lot of these guys, Tannehill included, have made tens of millions of dollars throughout their career.
Yeah, sure.
So making $1 more million, like though you're not playing in games, you still have to go through the daily grind of the practices and the preparation. And you have to do everything that the starting quarterback is doing. You're just not actually in the game.
Bears have 2 top 10 picks. They got number 1. Fields didn't play horrible, but he definitely didn't do what they wanted. Is Fields a Bear next year?
To me, and surprisingly, I think he is. I think that if the Bears were going to go in a different direction at quarterback, Matt Eberflus already would have been fired. The reports coming out of Chicago is that they're keeping Eberflus. I think those two are connected. If they're keeping Eberflus, to me, that also means that they're keeping Justin Fields. If they were going a different direction at head coach, I would say they'd also be going a different direction at quarterback. But I think they're going to give that tandem at least 1 more year to see what they have.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's the way to go. I think you have, you can fix up the defense, definitely fix up the offensive line, things like that.
Well, look, like they can get someone like Marvin Harrison Jr. if they want to. They can trade down a couple spots, stack up a whole bunch of draft picks by trading down to one of those teams that wants to go take either Caleb Williams or Drake May. So get more ammunition in the draft. And then, again, take a guy like Marvin Harrison or maybe a pass rusher or an offensive lineman and have more flexibility to make more moves because you have more draft stock.
Absolutely. We'll talk a lot about the draft, obviously, in the next coming weeks. All right, if you're watching, get your keyboard out. If you're, here we go. Do I want to work up to it or do I want to? Okay, we'll hit the big ones. We won't hit them all. Coach of the year.
Oh, coach of the year. I mean,
who gets it?
To me, the 2 guys that jump out the most for coach of the year are Kevin Stefanski and DeMeco Ryans. Those are the 2 guys because of the turnaround in Houston. They went from being, the number 2 overall pick in the draft last year to winning their division and making it to the playoffs this year in a year where nobody had the Texans doing anything this year. So for me, D'Amico Ryan should definitely be in that conversation. And then Kevin Stefanski, because of something I mentioned earlier in the show, he's won games with 4 different starting quarterbacks this year. That's unheard of in the NFL. And not just winning games, but he has the Browns in the playoffs in one of those hot looking really good teams. Like, they're that trendy pick right now, right? Like, everybody's on the Browns train right now. Everybody's loving the Browns. Everybody thinks they're going to beat Houston. And they're so excited to see that Joe Flacco returning to Baltimore type of situation. That's what everyone's talking about with the Browns, right?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me either way in this game. It's interesting that these two guys, Stefanski and D'Amico Ryans, are facing off in the first round of these playoffs.
Yes.
But to me, those are my 2 top choices for Coach of the Year.
And I really think it could that race right there could be won in this game right here. I think the winner of this one maybe pulls that, but I'm leaning D'Amico Ryans personally. Defensive rookie. No, let's do comeback player. Comeback player first. Comeback player of the year.
Look, I mean, I think that Joe Flacco is the most deserving of that award. But in my opinion, DeMar Hamlin won that award before the season even started just by making the Bills roster. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think DeMar Hamlin had any chance of losing this award as long as he was still on the roster, regardless of what he's contributed statistically or anything like that to the team. Him being on the roster, I think he just kind of wins by default because of everything that happened last year.
People actually talking about Brock Purdy for this award too, which I think is interesting because it's not like he missed like a whole season or had this horrible injury.
Yeah, like he didn't miss a game.
You know. But anyway, I do like Flacco too as well. Okay, defensive rookie of the year.
I mean, it probably has to be Jalen Carter from the Eagles. He had a great season in the interior of that line. He's, one of the handful of guys that can wreak havoc on quarterbacks from the defensive tackle position. That's a rare breed in the NFL. There's not a lot of them, and it looks like the Eagles have one.
All right, here it is. Offensive rookie of the year.
Well, to me, it's not even close. To me, it's C.J. Stroud by a mile.
Really?
Without a doubt, no question. Look, I know Puka Nacua, the incredible season that he had, the record-breaking rookie season for a wide receiver.
Rookie record for receptions.
Yeah, but, a lot of the same things I said about D'Amico Ryans, the same things can be said about C.J. Stroud. He was supposed to be a project. And let's not forget, me and you were not 2 of them, but most people out there when the draft came around last year were all of a sudden very down on C.J. Stroud. And the word around the league was that a lot of teams don't like Stroud and don't like his skill set and blah, 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 and this and that and the other thing. And me and you never really understood why. And me and you both also said we take Stroud over Bryce Young any day with that number 1 pick. The Panthers, at least after 1 year, looks like they made the wrong choice. But C.J. Stroud, there were times this year people were talking about him already being a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and he's just a rookie. He got the Texans to the playoffs, of course. So to me, Stroud.
I just didn't know if I was surprised to hear you say hands down. I'm not against it. I just hands down because Puka's definitely made a case for himself. All right, so we got the coach, we got the comeback, we got the defensive and offensive rookies of the year. So now we get into the big 3. Defensive player of the year.
I'm going to go with Micah Parsons. Look, and there's only a couple guys that are even in the running for this, award.
I think this year it's 2 names. Last year it was 3. I think this year it's 2. People
Miles and Micah?
Yeah.
Oh, TJ Watt? Yeah, to me, Miles and Micah.
People will say TJ because he had the sack record and he was super influential and stuff like that. But I really think this is between Micah and Miles.
Yeah. To me, I'm going to go with Micah. I think that Miles had some bigger games this year than Micah had, but I think that Micah was just as, if not more, consistently dominant than Myles Garrett was. Look, you can't just look at sacks when you're analyzing pass rushers. You have to look at their win rate. Exactly. You have to look at their pressure rate. You have to look at all of that kind of stuff. And Micah is at the top of pretty much all of those statistics. on a consistent basis. And by the way, he's getting double and triple teamed every single play. He's getting held almost every single play, and they're still not throwing any penalties for him. They never call holdings. Like, it's like this insane streak of non-holding calls against Micah Parsons, but they're double, triple teaming him and holding him, and he's still doing what he's doing. Imagine if it was a fair playing field. So for me, Micah Parsons.
The superstars are supposed to get the calls, not get the calls.
Exactly. But I think it's because he's vocal about it. And you know what I mean?
Maybe.
Like, he talks about it, so they're going to like, oh, yeah, we'll show you.
Yeah, exactly. I like Miles for this one. You and me split on a lot of these so far, but we agree it's between two people. Jerry makes up a great point. He won't get it. He's definitely like, the defensive MVP for the Ravens, maybe the AFC, but Roquan Smith, what a fantastic trade for the Ravens in the offseason, and he definitely had a phenomenal year. So Jerry, absolutely correct in giving credit where credit is due.
I love that shout out. Roquan Smith has been invaluable to that Ravens defense, both in the middle of the field and pass coverage, and he is unbelievable against the run. He is a huge reason why the Ravens have been the best defense in the NFL this season.
Oh, yeah. He's a game changer, 100%. Offense.
He's right. He won't win it, but I love that shout out.
I do. It absolutely deserves to have his name in that. That's like the fourth guy they invite to New York for the Heisman race. It's like, you're not going to win, but we want to make sure, that we recognize what you did.
Right.
Offensive player of the year. Now you have to split it here, right? Because people don't win offensive player and MVP. Because we're going to ask both questions.
Well, I don't think a quarterback. Listen, I don't think a quarterback is winning offensive player of the year this year. I don't think any quarterback was statistically dominant enough to win offensive player of the year. But we all know the MVP is a quarterback award now. So for offensive player of the year, it probably comes down to Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill, probably. But I'm going to give it to McCaffrey.
I'm giving it to, not Tyreek. I think it's got to be McCaffrey. 100%. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like, for me, it's going to be McCaffrey, But, Tyreek Hill for a lot of this season was on pace to set a new receiving record. He was on pace to be the first 2,000-yard receiver in NFL history. He came up a little bit short. Part of that, we have to remember, too, he was dealing with an injury over the last month of the season. He had that ankle issue that he was playing through that limited him in some ways. But yeah, for me, I am giving it to McCaffrey because, in my opinion, McCaffrey might be the only player in the playoffs right now that's more valuable to his team than the quarterback is.
The quarterback,
right?
100.
Like,
absolutely.
If Purdy were to go down or McCaffrey were to go down, right? Like, the way that their Super Bowl odds would change, I think losing McCaffrey hurts their chances of winning a Super Bowl more so than losing Purdy.
Look, and I know this is part of the position, but to me, right, McCaffrey has 21 touchdowns to Tyreek's 13. McCaffrey finished 100 fantasy points ahead. Tyreek actually finishes wide receiver 2. McCaffrey has roughly 300 yards, 280 plus yards more than the next guy, whereas Tyreek only has 50 yards more than the next guy. Had two guys over 1,700 yards, but Tyreek was 1 yard away from 1,800. I absolutely love what Tyreek did, but CMC's the only guy to do what he did, and he did it at a higher percentage, higher number level, higher statistical level than Tyreek. So again, Tyreek, I love the shout out. I think if you're going to give Tyreek a shout out, I think you give the same shout out for CeeDee Lamb, because CeeDee Lamb actually beat him in most of these categories. So to me, it's CMC hands down. That's the one that's hands down for me. And the MVP, as much as I would like to create a lot of debate here, and the media will, ESPN, all those guys are going to create a lot of debate. They're going to throw a lot of stats at you. That hold up with Dak Prescott and Josh Allen. I really want to say Josh Allen. Josh Allen was my pick. Josh Allen obviously has been the most important player to his team over the last 5-6 games. The stats are there, but it's got to be Lamar Jackson for MVP, doesn't it?
It's 100% Lamar Jackson because, some people forget that MVP is not a statistical award. It's not a statistical award. Offensive Player of the Year is a statistical award. Look, if you want to compare stats, yes, Dak Prescott had a far better statistical season than Lamar Jackson. But most valuable player is not the most statistically dominant player. It's what the word in the middle of the award says, and that's valuable, right?
That's
Look what the Ravens did this year. They're not doing it without Lamar Jackson. Lamar had a fantastic season. You take him off of that Ravens team, and they're probably mediocre. The award has to go to Lamar Jackson, though I want to make my case for Dak Prescott, right? As a
mhm.
Cowboy fan,
Sure.
but I would just be being a homer and a fan by trying to make that case for Dak Prescott. It's Lamar Jackson.
Look, Prescott 8 games above 20, Lamar 9 games above 20. Prescott 2 games at over 30 fantasy points, Lamar 3 games over 30 fantasy points, and those fantasy points equate to stats. That's why I'm bringing up fantasy. I know the NFL doesn't care about fantasy points, but it equates to stats. But the biggest thing, nine over 20 points in the last 4 games for Lamar Jackson. Prescott had a great middle of the road, but not as good towards the end of the season. We talked about Mayfield having a good end of the season. We talked about Fields. We talked about Flacco. Flacco having a fantastic end of the season, even better in some categories than Lamar. But Lamar really coming through for his team at the end of the season. And I think, like you said, when it comes to MVP, that's what you're talking about. Jerry also likes it. Lamar, like you said, it's going to be hands down. There's no surprise here. He's going to get it. And Jerry brings
He's
up a really good
minus
thing.
20,000 to win the award.
Yeah, it's
Minus
not even.
20,000.
It's ridiculous.
200 to 1. 200 to 1. So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. He won.
I think the MVP and the Offensive Player of the Year are really the two that nobody can debate. And I think the other ones are pretty clear too, as we talked about. But even you and me kind of split on Defensive Player of the Year. It's two guys, but we kind of split there. Coach of the Year, things like that. It's two guys, but there could be a split there. But those ones are not splits. All right. To wrap up the show, as we get towards the end, we have to talk playoffs. We're going to take the next 15 minutes. We told you last week this was going to be a long one. We knew it was going to be a long one. It's the playoffs. We got to wrap up the season, all that. We're going to do that even more throughout the season. Go over to armchairathletics.com, join the Fox Force, and be the first. Get all the stats, get all the stuff you need for next year. But we're going to train your brain to play fantasy football next year. The price on it right now includes the whole year. It's absolutely ridiculous. Armchairathletics.com, look for the Fox Force and join. Now, Jerry says the offensive TD turnaround for the Ravens last year, this year, absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, just the entire offensive output this year has been ridiculous. Bring this up. Bam. There we go. NFC Summer Playoff predictions. We predicted as we went through all the stats, all the games, each one. These were my playoff teams. These were Adam's playoff teams. And this is how it actually played out. Remember, we made these predictions before the season ever started. We did this in the preseason. We got over 160 games right. 165 for me, 167 for him before the season ever started. So we didn't do horrible here. All right, we had San Francisco and Dallas sitting up there at the top. We both had Detroit getting in, which they did. And then, and we had Philly. So we thought Seattle was going to be better. We thought New Orleans was going to win that division. And you got to take a shot. You took your shot on Minnesota. I took mine on Carolina. I will take, yeah, I mean, it's the first show. Give me a break. But we didn't do horrible, right? I mean, especially we got the top two right. Detroit's in there. We got that division winner right. We got 3 of the 4 division winners. We got one of the wild cards. So that's 5 of 7 is pretty good.
Oh, I mean, that's damn good. 5 of 7, I think, is really good.
Before the season ever started, that won some money if you placed it. Let's get into the next one. Oops, sorry. AFC, those were mine. Those were Adam's, and that's how it actually played out. Again, not quite as good in the AFC, but we talked about how the AFC was a little more up in the air. We both got Kansas City right, as did most of the world. We had Buffalo winning their division, and then Jacksonville and Cincinnati crapped the bed on us. I, of course, had the Steelers, and I had the Aaron Rodgers led Jets, which didn't happen. You had them at least making the wild card. You did get Miami right, though. So combined, we got what, 3, 4 again, 4 of the 7 in this one.
Well, like injuries and other things, this is where it kind of showed its head with doing the preseason predictions. Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, thing like that, had a major factor, and that's something that, we couldn't really predict happening.
Yeah, you really can't. What are you going to do? So here's how it played out. All right. These are the matchups, and we're just going to talk about them right quick. Who do we got moving forward from here. In the Saturday games, first up, sorry about that, is going to be Cleveland versus Houston. So we're over on this side of the board. Cleveland versus Houston. Who's moving on? This is one of the tougher ones to call, I think.
It is one of the tougher ones to call. My gut says that Cleveland is going to win this game, but the problem is that it feels like everybody is picking Cleveland to win this game. And, they're forgetting that this game is in Houston, and Stroud's been great all year. Their defense has been a little bit better than they get credit for. So, again, I'm going to go with Cleveland because that's what my gut is telling me. But this upset would not surprise me at all. I mean, they're only 2-point favorites, which tells you how close the line makers think it is. And it always scares me when it feels like everybody's on the same side of basically a pick 'em point spread.
Absolutely. And yeah, no, it is one of the tougher ones. And, everything about this game says Houston except Joe Flacco. And when you bring Joe Flacco in and the way he's been playing, damn it. Like, can't you make it easy?
All right, well, who do you want for the playoff run as your quarterback, Stroud or Flacco? Because I think I'm still going Stroud.
I don't know. Flacco's got the experience. Flacco's been here before. Stroud hasn't. That's the thing. I did, in fact, take Cleveland as well, but like you said, I will not be surprised. I'm anxious to watch this game. Kansas City and Miami. Miami has to go to Kansas City to do it. We all know how it played out the first time. We all know how Kansas City is. Who you got winning this one?
Give me the Chiefs, and I think that the Chiefs are actually going to win this one fairly comfortably.
Tyreek Hill returns to Kansas City again, and I think that it's going to be up to whose defense can do what, but it's the Patrick Mahomes factor. It's Patrick Mahomes in the defense, Andy Reid.
It's in Arrowhead. The Chiefs' defense has been great all year. I think they'll take care of business.
Miami's not playing their best ball right now.
Not even close.
Yeah, I'll take Kansas City. Buffalo at the Steelers. Well, now we get into Sunday, and we got the Steelers at Buffalo. Steelers at Buffalo. So weather will not be a factor for this. We forget, we didn't bring this up during the Hulse, but Tomlin, will he be a Steeler next year? I think yes. And who do you got winning this one?
Look, I mean, this is your team, so I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this matchup, but I think the Bills win and win big.
We don't have the quarterback talent. We don't, with Watt out, that's going to really hurt us on defense. Micah Fitzpatrick is not 100% if he plays. And let's face it, Buffalo is on a freaking tear. Josh Allen is not giving anybody anything, and they're going to have the crowd behind them. I look for Steelers to give them a game. It's not going to be a gimme, but I think eventually Buffalo pulls ahead. And, yeah, I got Buffalo in this one, probably ending up big at the end. So go Steelers. I know David believes otherwise, and I appreciate that. The fan in me has Steelers winning, but I think Buffalo wins this game. Next up is going to be Green Bay at Dallas. This is actually going to be a better game than I think. I already know what you're going to pick, and I think I know why.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely taking the Cowboys in this game. I actually, like I said about the Bills, I don't see this one being particularly close. Look, Jordan Love has had a great season, but in a playoff game in Dallas against that defense is a much different situation than anything he's had to do before in his career. Look, maybe he shows up, but to me, that's really the biggest matchup I'm watching is the Dallas defense against Jordan Love, and I actually expect the Dallas defense to dominate.
And look, I mean, Dallas is at home. CeeDee Lamb is on a tear. Micah is up for Defensive Player of the Year. Definitely could win it. I mean, and then, Bland, he's a boomer bust guy. If you look at the stance, Bland is a boomer bust guy. But these leading takeaways with 9. The home crowd.
Well, he's another Trayvon Diggs, right?
Everything says Dallas in this one. To me, the game I want to watch more than any of them, if I had to pick only one game to watch, it would be this Detroit Rams at Detroit Lions game. I think it's going to be a fantastic game. Obviously, all the storylines are there with Goff and Stafford and the whole Super Bowl thing and just the offense of this year, Puka versus Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, we could just go forever on the storylines in this one. I think it's going to be fairly high scoring. Maybe it's the defense that makes that one stop that wins this game. I think this one comes down to the end. I'm excited about this one, but we got to pick a winner, and that's where the difficult thing comes in. Who wins this one, Adam?
I'm taking the upset here. I like the Rams to get it done. They've been one of the hottest teams and best teams in the NFL over the last 6 or so weeks of this season. The Detroit defense, which was very good at the beginning of the year, forgot how to cover passing again in the second half of this season. They give up like 1 million passing yards per game against Stafford, who's recently throwing like 1 million passing yards per game. I mean, look, the storyline of the game, of course, is Stafford's return to Detroit, and he's doing so in a playoff game and all of that kind of stuff. It could be emotional, this or that. I don't think any of that stuff's really going to matter that much. To me, I just see the Rams passing offense against Detroit's passing defense, and that is the massive advantage in any matchup that I could see anywhere across the board in this game. And because of that advantage being so massive, I think the Rams win the game.
I'm taking the Rams as well. Sorry, Detroit fans, you deserve a win at some damn point, but you just drew the wrong team for this first one. Kyren and Puka. Look, San Francisco couldn't stop Puka, and he's a rookie. So I think Detroit's defense is probably their Achilles heel. Again, I look for a great game. This could come down to the wire. This could get ruined on a field goal. This could be one of those where the Rams, dominate statistically in this one, and Detroit wins on a last-minute field goal. I don't know, but I'm taking the Rams. I love Kyren and Puka's chances. And Sean McVay may be candidate number 3 for Coach of the Year. If you take the first 2 out. I don't know, for getting them back. Nobody expected them to be here at all. And the last game is going to be Philly at Tampa. We talked about the Eagles' horrible pass defense. That's what everybody's going to be watching. Can the Eagles' defense step up against Baker Mayfield in this offense? People will be talking about the run defense, but that's not where White has made his money. That's not why White is RB4. Fantasy RB4 this year, is because he can catch passes, and we know that's the Eagles' Achilles heel. This is Tampa's pass offense versus the Eagles' pass defense, which has been absolutely horrible. The Eagles on a horrible skid. Are they in quicksand mode? I think Tampa wins this game. I'm sorry, I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to agree with you. I think that Tampa is going to win this game at home. I mean, look, Tampa has not looked good over the last couple weeks either, the last 2 in particular, but the Eagles have been disastrous for a long time. Regardless of losing 5 of their last 6 games, that 5-game winning streak they were on before this losing streak, every game required them to come back from behind by more than a 10-point deficit to win those games. So we could be looking at even a much worse record for the Eagles than their disappointing 11-6 record that they have so far. And look, I'm kind of saying, the same thing about this matchup that you are, but I just kind of have a different spin on it. Like you said that, can the Eagles defense step up in this one? It's that same matchup I'm looking at, but I kind of see it from the opposite angle, and it's, can Baker Mayfield take advantage of their disastrous passing defense? Mayfield's been awful in his past 2 games after a very good season all around for Mayfield. Can he get it together in one of the most favorable passing matchups that he can have? Can he take advantage of it at home? If he can, the Bucs are going to win this game. If he can't, I don't think they will.
Here's the good news, is that we picked 4 home teams and 2 visiting teams, which matches up well with how the season went. I think it was 159 to 113 or something, home versus away. So we went 4-2. The rub is that we, aside from the Detroit Rams game and the Texan Brown game, which don't really have a true favorite, we picked the favorites in all these games. And so we'll see what the script writers in Vegas have to say about that. Because,
like when we're talking about favorites, there's really only 2, in my opinion, like true favorites this week, and it's the Bills and the Cowboys. The other 4 games, like, yes, there's always going to be a point spread favorite, but those lines are very close, and most people can see those games kind of going either way. So to me, the favorites this week, what's that?
I can see Hurts stepping up and throwing a shocker, and the offense being the story. Everybody's looking at the Tampa offense versus the Philly defense.
Well, really, you have to remember, too,
can you outscore the Eagles? I mean, the Eagles have fantastic offense.
The Eagles winning is not an upset.
No, it's not.
The Eagles winning is not an upset. Go look at the point spread. The Eagles are still favored in this game. So though like a lot of people like the Bucks to get it done because they're at home, the Eagles are the favorites in this game. So
I can see
technically
that.
us picking the Bucks is us picking another upset. If you go by the point spread, they are the underdog.
I mean, I'm not going to change it, but I'm honestly talking myself out of it because I do think the Eagles' offense is fantastic, and the Eagles could definitely have a really crappy game on defense and just completely outscore Tampa. The Eagles have one of the best scoring offenses in the NFL. Jalen Hurts has 15 rushing touchdowns. He's fantasy QB2. Andre Swift is up there. Obviously, A.J. Brown is one of the best in the league. You got Goddard, who's going to get involved 100% in this game. I mean, everybody's looking at that horrible Eagles defense, but honestly, it just could be the fact that Tampa's defense doesn't have enough to stop the Eagles. So again, I won't change it, but I actually am. If I could change it, I would probably change it to the Eagles because of that offense. I won't, but that Eagles offense is nothing to mess with.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't looked the same recently as it did earlier in the year. You know, when you look at a lot of their statistical numbers, a lot of that is from their first 11 games, not their last 6 games, where Hurts has been turning the ball over. They have not been dominating on the ground or in the air like they were. And by the way, the Buccaneers are very good at stopping the run. They can be beat with the pass for sure.
But did we
But
make the
both of these
same
teams
reasoning
have
for
good
Kansas
rushing
City?
defenses and bad passing defenses. So
Didn't we make the same excuse for Kansas City though? Kansas City hasn't played well. They've dropped a couple games, but we're saying it's Mahomes in the
yeah, but they
playoffs.
didn't lose
Can we
five out
say
of
the same
six.
thing? Well, they didn't.
No, because they didn't lose 5 out of 6, and their defense is still one of the best defenses in the NFL.
I hear you. You're right. You're not wrong. You're not wrong on that. It's going to be fun to watch. That's what I know. That's what I know for absolute certain. It's going to be fun to watch.
And they're also playing the Dolphins, who are struggling even worse than they are.
Yeah, I'll give you that too. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we made it. Holy cow. 2 hours later, here we are. So much to talk about. It won't be 2 hours next week, but it's going to be at least as entertaining, if not more. We're going to have all kinds of stats for you next week. Ridiculous stats. As we get into the season stats, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. You're not going to want to miss it. As I flip things around, make sure you come back, check us out. Make sure you're following on the Instagram because we're going to be throwing out stats all week long. Season stats, fantasy stats, all kinds of stuff to help change your game. And like I said, go over to armchairathletics.com. Join the Fox Force. It's a year-long membership join right now. Year-long. Super low to get in, and it's going to last all year long. That price will go up as we get closer to the start of the season. So get on the Fox Force now to get all those membership benefits. It's stats, it's newsletters, it's articles, it's merch, it's contests, it's all the whole bag, and it's a ridiculous price right now. So go do that. Go over to sportskita.com. Sportskita.com. Put that /Adam Hulse and watch your fantasy knowledge, your football knowledge, your winning go up. Thanks to Adam Hulse at SportsKita, Kita with a K.com. It's right down there in the middle of it at SportsKita /Adam Hulse. And he joins us every week, every Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. I hope you guys will as well, right here on the Fantasy Sports Corporation. We're bringing it. We're going to treat. We're going to up your winning. We're going to retrain your brain to fantasy, how to play fantasy. We love you guys for joining us. Thanks for all the comments. Just thanks for being a part of it, and we'll see you guys next week on that effing morning after show. For Adam Hulse, I am Chris Fox. We appreciate you guys. Have a great fantasy week. See you on the other side.